Well, thank you very much for staying with us this morning. We have two gentlemen to look at the issues around the Finance Bill of 2021 that's just recently been sent to the National Assembly and how that may or may not help the Nigerian economy. Wabuzo Emeke is a council member, Chartered Institute of Taxation in Nigeria. He joins us from our studio in Abuja, as well as Taiwo Oyedele, who is Africa Tax Leader, PwC. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Mr. Emeke, let me begin with you. Well, quite a number of laws again to be amended with the Finance Bill 2021. How does it come across to you?
Well, good morning, viewers. 2021 Finance Bill is a welcome development. You know, it has been something that have been started implementing from 2029 up to 2020 and now 2021 bill. It's a welcome development in the sense that that is one of the basic foundation for implementation of the 2022 Appropriation Act. As it is, if it's well implemented, I'm very confident that it's going to improve the economy. However, we still have our concerns as professionals because the way it's being handled, it looks as if it's being put together hurriedly, as we expected more wider consultations.
To that one, by 2029, I hope you meant 2019. Well, Mr. Oyedele, you have been at this for quite a while yourself, and first of all, and you've done quite some work trying to help people understand it. First of all, how does it resonate with you? This is for the umpteenth time, it's like every time there is the finance bill comes out, there are amendments to all of our, revenue generating laws. Mr. Oyedele, we do not have your audio. If you could check to unmute.
Okay, so I'm actually unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right, thank you very much, Ayo. So I was trying to say that first I need to state that I'm a member of the committee that worked on the finance bill, but I do not speak for government and I'm not speaking for the committee. So having said that, I think it's commendable that as a country we've been able to sustain the periodic and annual amendments to the laws. I think it's just the reality that nothing is static. The economy is dynamic and the circumstances that we face, they change very frequently. So we cannot afford to have legislations that are static and not dynamic to be able to address those circumstances. So this finance bill, for example, is seeking to amend about 12 or 13 different pieces of legislation, many of them bordering on taxation, but also we have some bordering on the establishment of certain agencies, as well as fiscal responsibility. Overall, I think we have some changes there that are good news. We have those that are not so good news, especially from the perspective of the private sector and businesses. But I'll say that within the context of what we're having to deal with as a country, overall, the proposals are understandable.
Oh, yes, 12 laws, as it stands, are meant to be amended with this 2021 finance bill, as you referenced. And our guest in Abuja also referenced, I mean, this comes with the budget. So this is like the side dish, as I jokingly said yesterday. That's the finance bill, and the entree is the appropriation bill itself. But this is a third in its series. We'll still get into the nitty-gritties of this one, but I just want us to take a step back a bit. The third in its series. So we had 2020, 2019, 2020, and now 2021. And I think it's important to just review how effective the previous ones have been. Because if you look at the objectives of the finance bill itself, what it is meant to achieve, I mean, the government put out the objectives, and I'm sure you've referenced that time and again, is meant to reform Nigeria's tax laws, support MSMEs in line with ease of doing business. It's meant to incentivize investments in infrastructure and capital markets. And as you can see, raise government revenue. So these are the objectives that we set out to achieve with the first one in 2019. From your perspective, Mr. Oyedele, let me just begin with you on that point. Have we been able to achieve these objectives with the Finance Bill or the Finance Act 2019-2020?
Yes, a very, very good question, actually. So this is one area where, as a country, we can do a lot better. We're not very good with making an assessment of the impact in terms of the various government policies, and even beyond taxation. So you can see all the nice stuff and the rhetorics. You can even get the applause of the people. But at the end of the day, like they say, the devil is in the details. So on the ground and in reality, are people feeling the impact? We do not have, reliable data in Nigeria, and nobody is tracking that, intentionally to be able to come back to us and say, in all these important areas, this is where we were at the time we introduced policies. Now this is where we are and where these are the gaps that we have, and this is what we plan to do about those gaps. But if I want to speak broadly, I'll say in terms of raising revenue for government, you would recall that the 2019 Finance Act introduced the VAT rate at 7.5%, which was 5% before then. And we have seen that progression in the revenue collection, particularly VAT, to the extent that last year, VAT collection ranked #1 of all the taxes in Nigeria, even ahead of petroleum profit tax. So to that extent, there has been progress in that area. I would say maybe more is even expected. If you think about SMEs, they were exempted from, paying companies income tax. If their turnover was less than 25 million a year, they did not have to worry about VAT registration and charging VAT. But my experience on the ground is that the vast majority of SMEs are not even aware. And even for those that are aware, they're like, well, I wasn't making any profit before. If you exempt me from tax, it means nothing to me. Or they were not even in the tax net. So overall, it's good in terms of trying to encourage formalization in particular. But in terms of the impact on SMEs, it has been very marginal. So if you think about modernizing the tax system to be in line with the rest of the world, again, some progress have been made, especially in terms of using technology and intelligence. So the tax authority now can connect to the systems of taxpayers to get data and information directly, so that the chances for tax evasion and aggressive avoidance is significantly reduced, including introduction of significant economic presence for digital economy. So overall, we have made some progress. My assessment is a lot more still needs to be done.
You'll tell us a little more about those things that need to be done in a bit, because definitely there's so much to cover in this conversation. But Mr. Emeke, you began earlier by saying that you had some concerns, especially with the finance bill. Can you tell us a few of them?
Well, one of the issues, like I said, is issue of consultations. And because if you find out the way the previous acts were implemented, there are a lot of concerns actually going around it. Basically, the implementation is another thing entirely. Like my professional colleague said, in terms of implementation by the tax authority, like the SMEs that are actually exempted, I mean those who have 25 million below, if you still walk into most of the tax authority, FRS, the impression there is that they are still expected to file. Meanwhile, it's expected that they are not supposed to file, and before you know it, they are faced with penalties, for non-compliance. That is just one of them. Then the second, again, is that issue of information and sensitization. It is still very, very below average. Most of the taxpayers are not even aware of what is going on, in terms of this finance bill and the rest of it. Then, still in line with issue of whether it has improved the system. Basically, yes, like he mentioned the issue of VAT. On issue of even stamp duty, like from 2019 to 2020, it moved from about 18 billion to about 120 billion, which is over 500% increase. So in terms of revenue, it's okay. But like I said, entirely on the ease of doing business, there is a whole lot of concern around about this.
Well, when you talk about the SMEs not needing to file, I'm wondering how government or the authorities would know that they have not crossed the 25 million naira threshold if they do not file.
No. You see, the issue is the law. They say that, based on their previous year's turnover, they already know they are within that threshold. Now, that they are not filing monthly does not mean when they file their annual account that they will not be still caught in the net. So if they are exempted from monthly VAT filing and remittances, at the end of the year, they're expected to file the annual return. So even if those of them that know that they are above 25 million and deliberately refuse to file, by the time they file the annual return, they'll be made to suffer the consequences, which is the issue of the penalties and the interest on whatever amount that they did not file.
Well, Mr. Yedele, I want to speak to that because I know that you also mentioned something around that earlier about those who are not in the tax net and those who are in the tax net but are not even aware. So you want to speak to that filing part that Mr. Omeke talked about?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. So one, you need to get to a point where you capture all the information about your taxpayers, and you don't necessarily have to wait for them to file returns. There are countries, even in Africa, including Rwanda, where no taxpayer even needs to file VAT returns because government is able to get that information directly as you issue invoices and all of that. They're able to get it into their system. So you don't have to place the burden on small businesses to file returns just for you to know. By the way, nobody does business and transaction with themselves. So chances are that even these small businesses are transacting with large firms. So if I'm selling any product without naming any particular product, chances are that it's a big company that is manufacturing them. If I'm manufacturing those products myself, it means that government needs to find a way during my personal income tax returns and the other intelligence in terms of the payment system, when I pay my suppliers on the banking system, they should be able to pick that information and to do whatever analysis they need to do and only allow me to file my annual returns rather than monthly returns. But the other area I want to address, is your point about what are these areas of concerns and areas that I think that government could have done differently. And there are a few of them, but I'll focus on the most important ones. Number one is we have been talking about multiple taxation in Nigeria since I have been an adult. More than 20 years I've been practicing taxation. But every single time we talk about it, we tend to take steps that are even, compounding the problem further. So we have officially over 60 different taxes in Nigeria, unofficially more than 200. And having said that, even this year alone, the National Assembly has passed a bill that is seeking to introduce another levy on companies for what they call tertiary healthcare fund, right? We have all manners of earmark taxes for, whether it's education, whether it's information technology, whether it's police, whether it's engineering and infrastructure development agency. They're just all over the place. I don't know whether anybody is adding up those numbers, those 1% here, 2% there, whether it's even now more than 100%. So that's a big issue. We're still not addressing that. And I would love for us to be able to do that. The other one is multiplicity of agencies. So you create new agencies every time and they're collecting revenue. There's loads of MDAs that are collecting revenue, right? The National Tax Policy approved in 2017 prescribes that there should be only one tax authority per level of government. So which means at the federal government level, it should be only the FRS. Even Nigerian Customs Service should be merged with the FRS, like you have in Ghana, GRA, like you have in South Africa, SARS, like you have in Kenya, like you have in the UK, HMRC. That way, the opportunity for people to game the system is significantly reduced. And then we need to ensure that we use data and technology to capture people who have the ability to pay, but they are not paying. I usually say that when people have money and businesses, they do three things. They spend, they save, they invest. You need to track all those streams of spending, of saving and investment to know who is evading taxes. Why is it that Nigeria has never collected 1 trillion naira in personal income tax of all the 36 states? But South Africa, with less than 1/3 of our population, collects about 14 trillion, even though their exemption for the poor people not to pay tax is even higher than the threshold in Nigeria. So these are the areas where I would like for us to deal with, especially now that revenue matters seem to be the biggest challenge that Nigeria faces, second only to insecurity.
Mr. Oyedele, you raised quite a number of points, and let me just try to follow up on some of them. First, you said that there are 200 or over 200 unofficial taxes being collected. I just want to understand, are you saying that governments are collecting those taxes without laws to back them, or you're saying non-government actors collect those taxes on behalf of government and they don't remit into government coffers? Or what do you mean by over 200 unofficial taxes?
Yes, so it's both actually. So you have governments, especially at the local government level, collecting a lot of illegitimate taxes that are not supported by any law. You have some of it at the state level, right? But overall, that's government. So government itself is a problem in terms of multiplicity of taxes, both the ones that are legitimate, i.e. supported by law, and those that are not. Now, there's a list called approved list of taxes and levies. So that list has over 60. That's what I refer to as the official number of taxes. But then when you ask taxpayers, there was a study we did for the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Simple thing, just ask manufacturer, tell me all the taxes you pay and provide the receipts and the evidence. And when we added up, there was a particular state where manufacturers alone were paying 197 different taxes, right? So one, there's government. And then you have non-state actors, again, supported by the powers that be, who just make up their own taxes as they go along, right? So these are what we call informal taxes. No law to support it. The money doesn't go to government. In fact, there was a report about Lagos State and ag bureaus collecting over 120 billion naira a year. That is the largest of any IGR in Nigeria other than in Lagos State. If you add on top of that, there's the implicit tax that Nigerians have to take care of what government should ordinarily be doing for them, fixing their road, the road to their factory, providing security, generating water. If you put all of this together, it's just too much burden on a country where you need all the enablement and the right environment for development, for business growth, and then employment generation.
That's quite interesting, Mr. Oyedele, because the talk is always, we need to widen the tax net. But, from what you say, it looks like that tax net is already wide. We just need to make them official, as it were, and make sure those monies come into government. Because, it would seem everybody, literally everyone, pays one form of tax or the other. So is it a matter of widening that tax net or just making them official, backing them up by law and ensuring that those monies go into government coffers?
Yeah, so I think there are two things. One, the tax net is wide to some extent, but I think it has a lot of wrong people in the net, right? So every time you hear this in Nigeria, at all levels of government, they think that their money is with the informal sector. My view is that, out of the informal sector, you should probably target the top 1%. Leave the informal sector alone. Just collect data from them. They don't need to pay taxes. That's why many countries have thresholds for VAT registration, thresholds for personal income tax, thresholds for VAT and CIT, including even Ghana. I'm not even talking about the US, including Kenya. Now, you then have a lot of people making heavy money and transactions that are not in the net, or they are partially in the net, like one leg is inside the net and the rest of their body is outside of it because they make 10 billion and they declare 1 billion if you're lucky. So government needs to address that in terms of the tax net to ensure that we have the right people in the net, and then we put the burden, because now we have it disproportionately on the lower end of the economy. And the more important point is actually that we shouldn't be having more taxes we should have less. I wish government can say today, we have identified 50 different taxes that are creating more problems than solutions, and we want to repeal all of them and replace with one tax. It will interest you to know that in Nigeria, less than 10 taxes give us more than 98% of our revenue at all levels of government. And here we are with over 200. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Oh, Mr. Emeke, I imagine this resonates with you a lot because you have to deal with, taxation, different levels, help out to basically make the accounts add up, as it were. So is there some work being done to ensure that maybe these taxes are made official, or that we just make this, proper in a sense, so that we know what we're getting and we know where we need to work on? Is the CITN making moves on that one?
Yeah, just like Oyedele said, he said that in Nigeria we have about 3 kind of taxes we pay: the formal tax, the informal tax, and the impressive tax. And if you put all these together, you talk about issue of multiplicity of tax. But on CITN level, we see we've been doing a lot of wider consultation. We have been engaging the government, In fact, part of this Finance Bill 2021, we made a very critical input into it and expressed our opinion. But one thing again is for you to be able to give advice, and that is for it to be taken. On the side of the taxpayers, we have been doing a lot of sensitization, because actually we expect more from the government, Like there's the now, we're talking about the issue of the multiplicity of taxes. You talk about the issue of the burning matter on VAT and being a consumption tax. You can see that the finance bill is actually silent on it. And these are issues that boils down to what the taxpayers are bearing. So looking at it holistically, you find out that there is so much more to be done, And talking about issue of tax net, yes, the widening of tax net actually entails more or less bringing more people into the tax net. Not really talking about bringing the illegal taxes or more formalizing those taxes, but no, it's the issue of bringing more people into the tax net, because the taxes are there, but most people are actually out of the tax net. They are not within the tax net. That's the essence of it. But CITN is doing so much of enlightenment.
Just a moment, Mr. Emeke. I just need to get clarity on a point you made. If you can hear me, Mr. Emeke, pardon me. So you say that it's not about formalizing those illegal or unofficial taxes, but getting more people. So are you implying that those unofficial, illegal taxes can go on while we work on, getting more people?
No.
Okay, so what do you mean then?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying in essence is this: those illegal taxes are illegal. There's no two way about it.
So should they stop, or should we bring them in?
But what we're saying is, even within the legal taxes, a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of corporations are outside the tax net. So when we're talking about widening the tax net, it means bringing most of these people into the tax net. Just like what my colleague said about some people having their leg all in the tax net, while the whole body is outside the tax net. That is the angle in which we are talking about.
So when you said that the finance bill is silent on VAT, I recall the Minister of Finance recently saying that, well, they didn't want to change it because of a litigation, surrounding the VAT. But there were still some amendments to the law that concerns FIRS in terms of who is meant to collect what, and we'll take that up. But I wanted to bounce this off you. So one of the reports that caught the eye of people regarding this finance bill is that a statement was credited to a lawmaker saying that part of the content of the bill is asking that the TIN be mandatory for account holders in the country. That's the tax identification number. And I honestly tried to look through that bill and I didn't quite see anything like that. Maybe I missed it. So, is that something you have seen as well? Is there, what part of that bill do you think references that or points to that?
Well, before now, even the issue of TIN, came up in 2019 Act. And it has already been implemented. I'm sure that there's no anybody that walk into the bank to especially companies that want to register, that want to open bank account without the bank authorities demanding for their TIN. And besides, it's already seamless in terms of CAC registration. There's an interface between CAC and the FRS that once the companies are incorporated, automatically they generate TIN for them. So in terms of TIN generation, I think there's no much to be, emphasized over it. It's already in the bill.
Mr. Emeke, you may have misinterpreted my question. So what I meant is
making it more pronounced.
Not for corporate entities, I mean for individuals. There were reports yesterday that a certain section of the bill references that individuals, not corporate entities now, for individuals to open bank accounts or to continue to run bank accounts, they need to have the tax identification number. So I know that that's the case for corporate entities, but for individuals. But we need to go on a break right now. And when we return, we'll also ask Mr. Oyedele if he's, seen anything like that and what particular part of that bill references that, as well as other issues. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. You're welcome back, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Africa Tax Leader, PwC, as well as Mr. Wabuzo Emeke, the Council Member at Chartered Institute of Taxation Nigeria. Still with us on the program this morning as we discuss the 2021 Finance Bill. It's like we have the taxation slant to the conversation, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's one of the sure things in life. It's a death and taxation is quite sure. So, Mr. Emeke, before we went on that break, I was asking you about the TIN requirement, which has been reported to be in that bill. I tried to read through it. I didn't see it. For individuals who want to open accounts or continue to run their accounts. So that's what I meant for individuals and not for companies.
Well, I can't specifically say because I think I'm still actually studying the bill myself. So I can't specifically say which section of it that has to do with that.
Okay, so let me take this to Mr. Oyedele. That makes it two of us. I'm still studying as well. Mr. Oyedele, I think you've put out some content regarding this bill as well. So looking through it, did you see anything regarding the tax identification number for individuals who want to open an account or continue to run their accounts?
The answer is no. So there's no such thing in that bill at all. I do understand. I think this may be some misunderstanding by some tax professionals that some journalists spoke to, because the way the tax bills are numbered can be a little bit confusing. So you call it Finance Bill 2021, but it's for 2022 fiscal year. The same thing for the other previous one. So it may have created that confusion. In the 2019 Finance Act, there was the introduction of the requirement for TIN for businesses to open an account. In the 2020 Finance Act, that's the subsequent one, there was a provision for individuals doing business. So if you're just Taiwo and you're just Taiwo, just an employee, no business, you don't have that requirement. But if you have Taiwo and you are importing and clearing cars and selling them, or you're buying and selling iPhones, you're now doing business and you must indicate your TIN when you open a bank account. In the 2021 Finance Bill that we're talking about now, nothing about TIN, whether for corporate or whether for individuals. But I do think that even this emphasis on TIN is misplaced, because the reality is that people don't like to pay tax. I don't know any country where people are excited to pay their taxes. And it's even twice as difficult in Nigeria to pay your taxes, because you finish paying taxes and you still have to take care of what government should be taking care of for the people.
To take you up on that in a bit, if you don't mind. I want to take you up on that which you just mentioned now, because there are some elements and questions from me on that one. But when you talk about the fact that the tax identification number is seemingly absent, I saw a section on the amendment of the Value Added Tax Act, which says, for the purposes of this act, a non-resident person that makes a taxable supply to Nigeria shall register for tax with the service and obtain a tax identification number. Perhaps that's the only reference to TIN?
No, that's not a new requirement, because the conversation is we have a new requirement about TIN in this finance bill, right? So that's not a new requirement. Non-resident companies, including digital companies, have always been asked to register for TIN. That provision you just read in the finance bill, it's just repeating what has been there. But then the intention of that amendment is about the requirement for those non-resident companies to now collect the VAT and pay to the FRS. Before now, those companies didn't need to collect the VAT. They only need to charge it, and the Nigerian recipients would remit it. So what they've done there is to just lift what is in the law currently, including the requirement for TIN, and then amend just the provision about remitting VAT. So that requirement about TIN you just read is not a new provision in the tax law.
So I think you referenced something about, I think I heard social media, and that has also been in the news. I mean, in fact, it was on the dailies this morning, setting 7.5% VAT on, I think, when you need to do transactions with social media. And, you know, looking through the bill, you see the part that amends the Companies Income Tax Act, and it says that any company that transmits, emits, or receives signals, sounds, messages, images, or data of any kind by cable, radio, electromagnetic systems, or any other electronic or wireless apparatus to Nigeria in respect. And it goes on, but essentially says that, I mean, their income shall be deemed taxable. So in terms of saying that you have to pay 7.5% VAT according to reports, and then this one, is this related, or there are two different things? In fact, is that one in the bill as well, the 7.5% VAT?
Yeah. No, 7.5% VAT is not in the bill, but it's an inference that makes sense. So the two are not related. The one you just displayed on the screen is now saying that as a non-resident company, particularly if you're a digital company, doing online adverts, or you're watching movies online, you know, all those stuff that we do with app stores and the rest of them, they're saying that the company providing those services to people in Nigeria and businesses in Nigeria must now pay income tax on the profit they earn from those activities. So that's the one about the CIT. The other one, I think, is the point that Ayo made earlier on about these companies are required to register with the FRS, obtain TIN. That has always been the case. But in addition to that, they must now charge VAT and remit to the FRS. So what is expected, therefore, is that for those companies to comply, you then start seeing VAT on your invoices. So if you run a small business and you go on Instagram and you want to do a promo of your product, you know, imagine now this December where, you know, there's a lot of activities and promo, you then have to be charged 7.5% VAT because those companies needed to comply, and therefore you have to bear the burden of the VAT. So there's the two dimension. There's the tax to be borne by the companies, those digital foreign companies. There's the consumption tax, which is VAT, to be borne by the Nigerian consumer, all relating to digital economy.
Essentially, you're saying that, well, the bill is probably suggesting that there's going to be an increment on the services that they provide to Nigerians. Well, anyway, I guess I'll leave them to do that one. But there's something you referenced earlier about the fact that after you have paid taxes, you still have to take care of some things that government is supposed to take care of you. It only raises a question on my mind about the TED Fund Establishment Act, for instance, and the amendments to it. Tertiary education tax. And one still wonders if that is the case. There is a tertiary education tax, and a number of people are wondering how come the universities are the way they are. There is a little something that is supposed to go from corporations to the police fund, and people are still wondering how come the police is still the way it is. So the question then is, Mr. Idele, why should people be encouraged or compelled to pay tax when the things that their taxes are supposed to do still largely undone? How do we persuade people to pay taxes when things that the taxes are supposed to do are not done?
Yeah, no, I have to admit that it's very difficult to pay taxes in Nigeria. It is not easy, right? It's not easy anywhere in the world. I think it's twice as difficult in Nigeria because it's not funny and it's not convenient to part with your hard-earned money and give it to government. And on top of that, you then have to take care of everything else. And then you're wondering, what's the point of paying taxes in the first place? But I do think the encouragement that I have for Nigerians and businesses operating in this country to pay taxes, the other option we have It's not viable. When you don't pay taxes to government or the taxes paid to government are not well managed, you then pay a lot more informal taxes and implicit taxes. So everybody has to pay tax in life. It depends on how you pay it and who you pay it to. So what we need to do as a country is to get to a point where government can actually earn the trust of the people to say, pay me your tax and I will take care of you. So that way it's less painful when you have to part with your money and your hard-earned resources in the form of taxes. So what we have currently is, take for example the conversation about government, and the World Bank has been saying this with their global template, that Nigeria should introduce excise duties on sweetening, soft drink, and the rest of it because to control sugar, and they call them part of the sin tax. I say, well, on one hand, Nigeria does not have a sugar problem. Even based on the World Health Organization prescription, Nigeria's consumption is less than the minimum, than the prescription of what individuals should consume. That's on one hand. On the other hand, the countries where it makes sense to impose taxes on, tobacco, on alcohol, on sugar, is because when you have health problems, the state takes care of you because there's free health care, and that resources come from the people. So therefore, if you create more burden on that system, you should just contribute more. And that makes sense. In Nigeria, when I take too much sugar and alcohol and I have a problem, it is on me and my family and my friends. Government does not take care of me. So if you now impose tax because you want to control sugar, you make me pay the tax on one hand, and when I have healthcare problem, I also have to take care of myself, and that becomes double taxation. So we should just leave this conversation about sin tax and just focus on the fact that we want to raise revenue, and then ask ourselves, is this the most productive and effective way of raising revenue at this time in our national, development and situation?
So, Mr. Oyedele, when you say we want to raise revenue, and there are different layers to that. When you say we, I mean, there's a federal government, there's state government, there's meant to be local governments also, of course, collecting revenue. And this takes me to Mr. Meke. I know Mr. Oyedele's views on, I mean, we've spoken about, the recent VAT controversy, which is in court as we speak. But Mr. Meke, let me find out from you. So this law or this bill is coming out just right after the controversy, which you referenced earlier. And I wonder, in terms of practice, in reality, is there a status quo that is being maintained right now? What is the status quo that is being maintained right now in terms of VAT collection? I mean, you of course know, you followed the whole back and forth between, is it FIRS and state government? So we've seen some states enact laws that, empowers them to collect VAT within their areas. And we saw the FIRS saying, no, this is what it should be. And then the court said you could maintain status quo, and the question about what is status quo. So please tell us, in reality, for those states specifically that have those laws that back them to collect VAT, what is the practice? Are they collecting? Is it the FIRS that is collecting while the case continues in court?
Yeah, well, like you rightly put it there, they say they should return to status quo. That means that it's FIRS that is actually responsible for collecting VAT presently. But however, you can see that VAT is a consumption tax. And some of these states, like you mentioned, are equally collecting consumption tax. So indirectly, I will say that on the surface, FIRS is collecting VAT. But these states, because of the State Act, because of the state law, they are still collecting consumption tax, especially on restaurants and hospitality businesses.
And so you say, I mean, states are still finding a way around that. But I'd like to get your thoughts on this amendment, which was proposed for the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act. And it says that the FIRS is meant to take precedence over any other laws with regards to the administration, assessment, collection, accounting, and enforcement of taxes and levies due to the federal government or federation. I mean, I know that the Minister of Finance said that they didn't touch the VAT, but this law has been amended such that the FIRS now has powers to collect, any law, not just for the federal government, but for the federation. So do you think maybe this is a smart way to couch it and say, well, while we await the court judgment, let's just put this in place? And it says FIRS is meant to collect the taxes, the VAT, for the federation, which involves all the states?
Yes, well, like I said, on the surface, it looks as if that is how it's moving to now, because based on this statement you have just read out, it's like FRS have now been given the jurisdiction to handle virtually all the taxes on the exclusive list, you know, and that's so much to be said, because if at the end of the day the court end up going in favor of FRS, that means this statement will more or less support them in terms of them having access to all that is in the exclusive list in terms of tax collection.
What's your take on this? Hello, Mr. Ede, can you hear me? Go ahead. What's your take on this?
Yeah, thank you. I think that that provision is not, in my view, it's not even new. So it's what has been in different laws that they're trying to put together in a way that people can read again and understand. If you read the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, it has a long list of taxes that FRS should collect. And it has a provision that says the FRS should administer taxes and coordinate issues to do with revenue. I do not think that the focus of this amendment is on the VAT, because you have to first and foremost ask yourself whether that question as to whether VAT is a federation tax or is a state tax, has that question been answered based on the Constitution? You know, the answer is up there in the air. So by saying that the FRS should collect and administer taxes for the federal government and the federation, what they have in mind is to align with the National Tax Policy of 2017. And it focuses on all revenues accruing to the federal government and also revenue accruing to the federation such that no individual state can collect. For example, consider import duties. You cannot ask all 36 states to go and stand at, in fact, with only federal government at the border, we're struggling to clear goods, right? So you can't ask all the states to go and stand at the border and collect import duties. You have international services. So you can't ask all the states to deal with foreign companies and foreign organizations to collect taxes. So this kind of taxes should be collected by the FRS, and I do support that. One of the problems we have is having too many agencies collecting taxes. In fact, this finance bill also says that when there is a need for tax investigation, call the FRS. EFCC should not be doing tax audit.
So, Mr. Oyedele, pardon me to butt in. We're winding down. And to be fair, I did say that, I mean, I know your views, at least to a large extent, on VAT and how the collection should be. But in terms of that particular amendment to Section 68 of the Federal Inland Revenue Act, I mean, the federation and the federal government bit was added, essentially. So it gives it a broader perspective. But as we wind down, let me just bounce this off you on a final note, and that's the amendment of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, because this is essentially also about getting revenues. But this one is about borrowing, and this is an amendment that I'd like to just get your final thoughts on as we wind out on this conversation. And it says that government at all tiers shall only borrow for capital expenditure, human development, and then the addition which this particular bill intends to add is, you can see it's highlighted there, is to undertake critical reforms of significant national impact. And of course, the other parts where it used to be with, and now it's all. But the point I'm trying to make here is, before it used to be government shall borrow for capital expenditure and human development before now. But now it's been, the parts to undertake critical reforms of significant national impact has been added. And I wonder, what does that mean? Does that just, open the doors to borrowing for anything, as far as you can just say to undertake critical reforms of significant national impact?
Yeah, I think there's a problem with that. Even the original provision of the law itself, as well as the proposed amendment, in my own view. So when you say government can borrow for capital expenditure, by the way, capital expenditure is defined to be any asset that lasts more than 1 year. So I can just be buying iPads. I can just be buying all manner of useless things, and I'll say they are carpets just because they can last more than 1 year. That even currently is the problem. Human development is not defined, right? So if I decide that I want to borrow money and share it to, poorest people in the villages, and only God knows whether they get the money, I can tell you it's human development because I need them to use it for, food, for healthcare, and for education. How are you going to be able to dispute that? Now, what we're adding is to say, you can also borrow for critical reforms of significant national impact. What does that even mean? I think while we're creating unnecessary confusion, we need to get to a point where in terms of our debt management, our revenue strategy, and expenditure efficiency strategy, it has to all be coordinated. We should only borrow when the borrowing will benefit our tomorrow. In other words, it's self-financing, it's going to stimulate the economy, and it has to be done in an efficient manner. All this thing about critical reform, about human development is too vague. And the definition of even capital expenditure is not appropriate for our circumstances.
On and on this one, Mr. Idele, because one of the questions I was going to ask you, when the federal government is proposing that the FIRS should be the only one collecting taxes and levies, my question came, and there is no amendment to the Customs Service Act. I'm wondering, is that included as well? But please don't answer that one now. We're completely out of time. Taiwo Idele is Africa Tax Leader, PwC, as well as Wabuzo Emeke, who is Council Member, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning. All right, so we continue after now to take on another issue altogether, especially talking about human rights. It's Human Rights Day. Do stay with us.